You've heard the stories. You might have even witnessed the chaotic fallout yourself. A lifelong narcissist reaches their twilight years and suddenly they are facing a severe, undeniable physical consequence. Sexually transmitted diseases and old age. It feels like a literal curse falling upon them after decades of manipulation. But I need you to stay with me to the end. Because what looks like divine retribution is actually something much darker and far more predictable. We often think of narcissism purely as an emotional weapon. The gaslighting, the lies, the psychological games they played with your mind. But there is a physical reality to their disorder. A hidden, reckless underbelly that they fought desperately to keep fully concealed. To understand this, we have to look at how a narcissist views human connection. For you, intimacy is about bonding. It's about trust, vulnerability, and mutual respect. But for them, it is nothing more than a transaction. A quick hit of supply to fill an endless, gaping void in their fractured core. And when you are constantly chasing that high, boundaries disappear. This isn't about morality, it's about their terrifying lack of impulse control. Narcissists believe they are untouchable. They operate under a grandiose delusion that the rules of biology, consequence, and reality simply do not apply to them. They take risks that normal people would never even consider, entirely convinced that they will forever outsmart the physical universe. Think about the betrayal you experienced, the secrets they kept, the double lives they so effortlessly maintained while looking you dead in the eyes. That same chilling detachment is what drives their hidden physical lives. They crave the thrill of the illicit, the rush of new conquests, the validation of being desired. And they will seek it out at absolutely any cost. As they age, something terrifying happens to their psyche. The mask begins to slip. The youthful charm they once used to effortlessly lure in high-quality supply starts to fade. The shiny exterior rusts. And as their standard avenues for validation dry up, their desperation violently amplifies. They can no longer be picky. They start scraping the absolute bottom of the barrel. You might wonder why they wouldn't just slow down. Why wouldn't age bring them peace or wisdom? Because narcissism is a starving beast. If they stop consuming validation, they have to face the agonizing emptiness inside themselves. So instead of seeking quiet reflection, they accelerate their reckless behaviors. They throw themselves into risky, fleeting, intimate encounters. It is this sheer, escalating desperation that sets the stage for their physical downfall. They ignore red flags. They bypass safety. They engage with people they know absolutely nothing about, purely because those individuals are willing to reflect a mirror back at them. The biological consequences of these blind, reckless choices are just waiting patiently in the shadows. And so, when a sexually transmitted infection takes hold in their later years, it feels incredibly poetic. It looks exactly like karma finally catching up to a lifetime of betrayal and lies. You see them suffering and your mind naturally wonders, is this a supernatural curse? Is this the universe finally balancing the scales after the unimaginable pain they caused you? But karma is just a word we use to make sense of the math. This is pure, unavoidable mathematics. A lifetime of treating human bodies as disposable commodities inevitably leaves a permanent physical mark. The disease is not a mystical curse sent from the heavens. It is the final, undeniable receipt for a lifetime of unhinged entitlement and deep psychological rot. Let us strip away the mystery and look straight into their psychological machinery. At the core of every narcissist is a profound, unshakable boredom. They cannot sit still with their own thoughts. Peace feels like death to them. To combat this chronic inner deadness, they require constant external stimulation. Intimacy becomes their most easily accessible numbing agent. But they build a tolerance to it just like any other addiction. The stable, loving relationship you offered them became boring. It didn't provide that chaotic, adrenaline-fueled spike of validation they secretly crave. So they had to step outside the boundaries. They had to break the rules. Because the thrill of getting away with the betrayal is half the actual high. When they engage in these reckless physical encounters, they are completely dissociated from reality. They do not see the other person as a human being with a history, a health status, or a life. They see them strictly as an object of supply. A prop in their grand theatrical production. And you do not worry about catching a life-altering illness from an inanimate prop. This is where their terrifying lack of empathy circles back to physically destroy them. Empathy isn't just about caring for others. It's a protective mechanism. When you care about your partner, you protect your own health to protect theirs. Because the narcissist lacks this fundamental human trait, they remove the very psychological barriers that keep normal people safe. They also possess a psychological trait known as magical thinking. It is a childish, deeply ingrained delusion that they are somehow biologically immune to the consequences that plague ordinary people. They genuinely believe their own lies. If they pretend a risk doesn't exist, their broken brain convinces them it simply isn't there. They walk blindly right into the fire. Think about how they handled the truth during your relationship. If you caught them in a lie, they simply rewrote reality. They gaslit you until you doubted your own sanity. They apply this exact same delusional framework to their physical health. If they don't look at it, if they don't acknowledge the danger, they believe they can somehow magically bypass the infection. But biological reality is the one thing a narcissist cannot gaslight. A virus does not care about their false self. A disease cannot be manipulated, smeared, or convinced that it is the one at fault. For the first time in their entire chaotic existence, they are confronted with a consequence that refuses to bend to their narrative. It just sits there, silent and absolute. As the years pass, this reckless pattern compounds like a toxic debt. In their youth, their body could perhaps mask the damage. They could bounce back, hide the symptoms, or charm their way out of the medical repercussions. But the aging body is unforgiving. The immune system weakens. The physical toll of a lifetime of cortisol, chaos, and hidden stress finally breaks them. And here is the most tragic part of their psychological breakdown. Even as they age, even as the risks multiply exponentially, they cannot change their behavior. The core wound driving their actions, that bottomless pit of insecurity, never heals. It only grows larger as they lose their youth. They are essentially trapped inside a broken machine that only knows how to crash. They are chasing a ghost of their former glory, a ghost of the power they used to wield over people like you. And in this desperate, frantic chase through the dark alleys of their later years, they throw caution entirely to the wind. They invite destruction into their own bloodstream simply because they would rather be infected than be ignored and forgotten entirely. Then comes the moment of unavoidable collision. The physical symptoms begin to manifest. It usually starts quietly. A discomfort they try to ignore. A doctor's visit they violently postpone because they are terrified of anything that pierces their delusion of perfection. They will deflect, deny, and self-medicate, desperately trying to maintain their false, flawless image. But the body keeps the score. Eventually, the diagnosis is delivered in a cold, clinical room. In this exact moment, the narcissist experiences a catastrophic psychological injury. They are sitting there, realizing that their invisible, reckless history has finally dragged itself into the harsh light of day. The secret is out, and it is living permanently inside of them. Their immediate reaction is never accountability. It is never quiet reflection or remorse for the partners they may have casually endangered along the way. Instead, it is pure, venomous rage. They feel victimized by the universe. How could this happen to them? They immediately begin searching for a scapegoat, scanning their twisted history to find someone else to truly blame. They will rewrite the narrative with terrifying speed. They will convince themselves, and anyone who will still listen, that they were the innocent victim of a malicious, dirty partner. The irony is sickening. The master manipulator, the one who orchestrated decades of deceit, now plays the fragile victim of circumstance. It is a desperate final act of their lifelong stage play. But the quiet moments are where the true horror sets in for them. When the audience is gone. When they are alone in the dark with a body that feels tainted. They can no longer outrun themselves. The infection becomes a permanent, physical manifestation of their deep internal shame. It is the visible proof of the ugliness they spent their entire life trying to hide from you. For you, hearing about their diagnosis might bring a complicated wave of emotion. You might feel a sudden, sharp shock. A strange sense of vindication mixed with deep, heavy sadness. Because you remember the person they pretended to be. The illusion of purity and superiority they projected when they were tearing you down. This diagnosis shatters that illusion forever and always. It is vital to understand that they are not suffering because of some cosmic curse you placed upon them. You did not wish this into existence. Their current reality is the direct, unedited culmination of thousands of tiny, arrogant choices they made while you were asleep. They built this trap with their own hands, laid the bait, and finally stepped squarely right into it. This disease becomes a heavy, undeniable chain around their neck. It complicates their ability to secure new supply. Suddenly, they have to navigate the terrifying prospect of disclosure. Will they tell their new targets? We both know the answer to that. Their lack of empathy dictates that they will likely hide it, continuing the cycle of betrayal but with much higher stakes. But the fear of being discovered haunts them constantly. They know that if their new supply finds out the truth, the mask will shatter permanently. They are living on a fragile edge, holding a secret that could destroy their remaining social standing in an instant. The anxiety of this secret slowly eats away at the grandiose exterior, leaving them paranoid and exhausted. They are finally experiencing the profound, agonizing vulnerability that they forced you to endure for years. The feeling of being unsafe in your own reality. The feeling of a dark secret poisoning your peace of mind. The universe isn't punishing them with magic. It is simply forcing them to live inside the exact emotional landscape they so casually created for other people. The collapse in their old age is devastating to witness. The disease accelerates their isolation. As their health declines, the superficial charm they relied on becomes impossible to sustain. The people around them, often already exhausted by years of manipulation, begin to pull away. The narcissist is left staring at the horrifying reality of a completely empty, quiet room. They begin to rot from the inside out. The physical infection mirrors the psychological decay that has always been there. It is as if the darkness in their soul has finally materialized in their bloodstream. They cannot manipulate the doctor. They cannot charm the medication into working faster. They are painfully, helplessly subjugated by the laws of basic human biology. This is the ultimate mortification. A narcissist requires a sense of physical and mental superiority to survive. To be reliant on medical care, to feel dirty, to face a decline that is publicly visible, it shatters their God complex. They become bitter, resentful shells of their former selves, lashing out at the few unfortunate caretakers who still remain by their side. You must realize how poetic this consequence truly is. They spent their life infecting other people's minds. They injected their toxic ideology, their self-doubt, and their chaotic energy into your psyche. You spent years trying to detoxify your brain from their influence. And now, they are literally battling a toxic infection inside their own physical, slowly aging body. But do not mistake their physical suffering for true emotional redemption. The disease does not suddenly grant them empathy. An infection does not rewrite a personality disorder. If anything, it makes them more rigid, more cruel, and more deeply entrenched in their victimhood. They will use their illness as a new weapon to extract pity from unsuspecting new innocent targets. They become the tragic martyr. They will weaponize their declining health to guilt-trip family members, demanding the unconditional devotion they never actually earned. They use their physical frailty as a shield against any accountability for their past abuses. How can you be angry with me? They silently project. Look at how much I am already physically suffering right now. It is a masterful, horrifying pivot. But the truth remains locked inside their failing body. They are dying alone, surrounded only by the transactional relationships they built. Their legacy is not love, respect, or genuine connection. Their legacy is a trail of broken people and a quiet, clinical file detailing the consequences of their reckless, empty human existence. This is why you must never feel guilty for walking away. If you had stayed, you would have been chained to this sinking ship. You would have been the one managing their medical crises, enduring their bitter rage, and perhaps even risking your own physical health. Their current reality is a stark, terrifying validation of every instinct you had to escape their dark presence. They are living in the prison they built. A prison of paranoia, physical decline, and absolute emotional poverty. The infection is just the heavy iron bar locking the cell door. It traps them in their own body, forcing them to sit with the terrifying emptiness they spent 70 years trying to outrun. There are no more distractions. The grand show has finally been canceled. So, when you look at their situation, do not see a supernatural curse. See the flawless, terrifying logic of cause and effect. See the inevitable destination of a road paved with arrogance and deceit. The disease is simply the universe handing them the bill for a lifetime of stealing energy, stealing trust, and treating human intimacy like a meaningless, cheap carnival ride. Now, we must bring the focus back to where it truly belongs. Back to you. Because their tragic ending is not your burden to carry. For so long, your mind was tethered to their actions. You wondered if they would ever face justice. You wondered if they would simply ride off into the sunset, happy and unscathed, while you were left to clean up the terrible emotional wreckage. You finally have your answer. The universe did not forget. Biology did not forget. The consequences of their actions were always moving toward them, silently and inevitably, like a slow-moving train in the night. You do not need to gloat, and you do not need to wish them harm. You simply need to observe the reality of what happens to a life lived entirely without a real soul. This knowledge should bring you a profound sense of peace. You survived them. You got out before the absolute worst of their reckless behavior could physically destroy your life. Your pain was temporary, a brutal chapter of growth. But their pain, this deep, internal physical and emotional decay, is their permanent reality. It is the inescapable, brutal ending to their story. You are allowed to feel relief. Society often tells us we must be perfectly compassionate, that we should mourn the suffering of others regardless of what they did to us. But you lived in the war zone. You know the truth of their cruelty. Feeling relieved that you are no longer in the blast radius of their destruction does not make you a bad person. It makes you a true survivor. Let their fate be the ultimate closure you never received from them directly. You will never get a genuine apology. You will never hear them admit that they shattered your heart for fun. But the universe has spoken louder than their lies ever could. Their current state is the ultimate confession. It is the undeniable physical proof of everything you strongly suspected all along. Take a deep breath and look at your own life right now. You have the capacity for real intimacy. You can sit in a quiet room and feel peace. You can love someone without needing to destroy them to feel powerful. Your body is yours, safe and respected. You possess the very human experiences that they were entirely locked out of by their own terrifying, deeply tragic disorder. They thought they were the main character, outsmarting everyone around them. They viewed you as weak for caring, for trusting, for playing by the rules of human decency. But in the end, your vulnerability is exactly what saved you. Your empathy is your shield. It kept you grounded in reality while they floated away into a delusion that eventually brought them to their very knees. You do not need to look backward anymore. The ghost that haunted you is currently battling its own demons, locked in a fight it cannot manipulate its way out of. The chapter involving them is permanently closed. They are no longer a terrifying force of nature. They are just a frail, broken human facing the undeniable consequences of a cold, deeply unfortunate, empty existence. As you move forward, carry this truth like armor. Trust your intuition. You saw the mask slip. You felt the danger before you had the vocabulary to name it. Never doubt that inner voice again. You have walked through the fire of psychological warfare and emerged intact, wiser, and infinitely stronger. Their curse is simply the miserable life they chose. Your blessing is your freedom. You survived the storm they created, and now you get to walk in the sunlight. Let them sit alone in the ruin they built with their own hands. The universe always balances the scales, not with magic but with the cold, hard truth of time. You have your beautiful, authentic life ahead of you. And they are left with nothing but the devastating, silent echo of their own terrible choices.